Welcome to Positive Readings. Today's episode is a look at the origins of English drama according to Anthony Burgess. It comes from this book. This book is actually a biography of Shakespeare, and it's a very interesting one as well. I will make a full video on this at another time, but in chapter 6, we have almost like a standalone essay exploring the origins of drama. So this is just when Shakespeare moves to London, and now we're going to have a look at how drama has developed into eventually what we get in the 1500s with Shakespeare, the world of drama that he is entering. It begins by looking at the connections of drama to essentially ritual, what Burgess calls magic. He says, drama begins as a kind of magic, ceremonies designed to bring the rain, make the spring come, revive the failing crops are an essential part of primitive life. Once the forces that determine the procession of the seasons and the fertility of the earth are personified into gods, then certain magical dramatic enactments become possible. At the darkest time of the year, when the sun is dying, a people with no scientific knowledge will try to aid the sick fire god in the heavens by using sympathetic magic. An actor representing darkness fights with an actor tricked out as the sun god. The sun god wins, darkness lies dead. What is presented symbolically must now, according to the law of sympathetic magic, be fulfilled in reality. So drama was a way to personify different forces in the world, act them out, and through that action, get the outcome that the people, the unscientific people, as they mentioned, were hoping to achieve. And they would assume by doing that, they will eventually get the outcome that they wanted. He calls this sympathetic magic. Of course, this is, a primitive idea. We could laugh at it, but who knows? Maybe there's some connections here. Certainly, it would be a powerful way of getting people to feel connected by a unified desire and wish that they would like to see for usually their well-being in the case of these rituals. Now, then he goes on to connect this with the origins of tragedy and comedy and their etymology, which I found very interesting. He says, sometimes a sacrificial element enters, so the term tragedy, which traditionally relates to the downfall and death of some great man for the good of the people, Oedipus, for example, can be traced back to the Greek word tragos, which means a goat. The goat has always been an ambivalent animal, symbol of lust and fertility, but also the creature on whose back the sins of the people must be loaded before ritual slaughter. Or as the Hebrew scapegoat driven out to starve in the desert. Comedy, while we are on this subject of dramatic categories, derives from komos, a country revel honoring the god Dionysus, the wine god and vegetable god who suffers, dies, and comes back to life again. So again, through these rituals and actually a certain element of sacrifice, or just either actually sacrifice of killing the goat or driving it out, we have tragedy, and this would explain the cathartic or the catharsis as Aristotle saw it. Tragedy, this important role where it allows people to expunge their fears through watching the downfall of a great man, but also comedy, where we can revel, feel that the world has been turned upside down, erase all kind of social distinction, and then come back to the regular times. Right, that's our comedy, and that's what we see in a lot in these different comedies. Now, after that time, after the Greeks, we move into the Romans. Again, Burgess has given us, I think, an interesting but quick history here. And with the Romans, we have an important figure, Seneca, not important. Well, he is obviously known for his Stoic philosophy, but we're focusing on the plays he wrote and how those ended up being very popular in an influence of European drama. So as he says here, Seneca influenced the popular dramatists of Renaissance Italy, France, and England, but he was, in his own day, a purveyor of texts for aristocratic play read-ins. He filled no amphitheaters. And then it's unclear if this is the plays of Seneca. I don't believe it is, based on some other things that are said, but Burgess, right after this, talks about this drama that formed after this, and the last, say, emperors of the Roman Empire. And they performed what he called in-stage reality, a sick tradition of in-stage reality, as opposed to stage realism. And basically what they did, as he says here, for the sexual act was openly presented on stage, and the true, not enacted execution of criminals would form part of the plot. So you can imagine how repulsive that would be. And based on that, he said that the early Christian churches condemned this and said, if this is drama, we don't want to have any part of that. But as Burgess said, well, they actually already did have some elements of drama in their performance of Mass and how they went about the sacrifice of Christ and the symbolic but highly dramatical means that they did this. So he's tracing. We've got on one hand this kind of theater that is repulsive, but we also have this rise in church movement that also has theatrical elements in the way that they are going through their rituals. And then he says the Normans introduce sacred drama to England. So they came in, they brought this kind of stronger connection between religion and dramatical performance. And this part I found interesting and also funny. He says the guild, so essentially they would perform during these religious festivals, they would perform different elements of the story of Jesus, but they would do it by guilds based on how what trade you were doing, these different trade guilds. It says the guilds would choose episodes from the Bible for dramatization, and the choice would usually be appropriate to the trade practice. Thus, the Chester guilds had the Last Supper, acted by the bakers, the Passion and Crucifixion of Christ by the arrow makers or fletchers, coopers, and ironmongers, and the Descent into Hell by the cooks. I found that last line kind of funny, that it was the cooks that had to perform the descent into hell. So this is the religious kind of connection to drama, the biblical connection. And eventually this was combined with the Senecan tradition. So this Seneca, his influence. And as he says here, Burgess says, the Senecan way was also the Athenian way. If a character is raped, mutilated, or murdered, have a messenger announce this. Never sicken your refined audience by showing it. So you wouldn't show, your audience is the upper class, they're refined, you don't want to offend them. This is talked about a lot in the mock play in A Midsummer Night's Dream, right? We don't want to scare this upper class women with the lion. So you're not going to show them the bloody murders and rapes and other things of that nature. And Burgess tells us there were essentially three ways to get to Senecan drama. You could take the Latin and translate it into English. You could look at the work of this French dramatist named Garnier and try to, again, translate that and rework what he's doing. Or the third way, and this is the way that that Shakespeare ends up taking. He says the third way was that followed by most of the popular dramatists, imitation of the Italian tradition, which called itself Senecan, but littered the stage with corpses, some headless, other tongueless, yet otherwise limbless. This was the tradition that Shakespeare pushed to its limit in Titus Andronicus, where there is rape, murder, mutilation, and finally cannibalism. So in that original kind of end of the Roman era Senecan drama, you did have in stage reality, actual sex on stage and murder. And then, of course, you have the church moving away from that. Then you had another form of this Senecan performance that was more like the Athenian one, don't offend people. But the version that the English drama took was coming from the Italians, which had maybe not the in stage reality, this actual stuff going on, this horrible stuff on stage, but it was dramatic realism, and you would have a lot of this stuff performed on stage. So a middle ground between the early Roman time and the Greeks, which is, have that stuff happen off stage. And that was the beginning of Shakespeare. And in Titus Andronicus is one of his first works, certainly not his most famous by any means, and hardly ever actually read or performed. And I think as he moved on, you see that he would have some brutal plays, certainly. Think of Macbeth and King Lear, but a lot of the murders, some of them did happen on stage, but a lot would have off stage as well. So, I found this as an interesting look at how drama was part of our lives directly at one time. I think it reminds us that how important ritual was to life and creativity. And I'm not saying we need to return to that, but perhaps that would be a good way to improve art in today's day. Find a way to make it more integrated into meaningful rituals within communities. And on the other hand, yes, I just find this to be an engaging history of English drama and the roots of what Shakespeare was working within. Thank you for listening.